Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you're tuned in live to another great edition here at the Southern Sports Scene. Hello, everyone. My name is Lucas Hill. Make sure you all do us a favor. Y'all hit the like, share, and subscribe down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short here on the Southern Sports Scene. Every live show brought to you by our good friends over at Frost Buddy. One over to frostbuddy.com. Use that promo code SSS15 to get 15% off your first purchase on all things cups, tumblers, mugs, whatever it is. And also going over to our friends at Chike Nutrition with 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of sugar. You can get every day started with a healthy, hearty cup of coffee. And as always, we love to partner with great organizations. Go on over and check out our friends over at Buzzer, which is where we are streaming our live show today. Download the Buzzer app today and see if you can become a verified follower today. Got a very special guest with us today. Our guy Jake from College Football Red Zone is going to be talking some ball with us. Figured I'd have him come along for the ride for this evening and get some college ball talking. Jake, good to see you, my friend. I know we have been talking for quite some time that we wanted to do this, and it's finally happened, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. The dog that you heard in the background is real lively. Long time listener, first time caller. So happy to be here, man. Especially clapping on Buzzer, who's been real good to us over on Red Zone as well. So shout out to them to be able to make this happen.
Well, we appreciate your viewership, man. I've been watching you guys for a while as well. So what can I say? We're two of the fastest rising media companies, in my opinion, over this year. I definitely think that there's a lot to look forward to in the future. But Jake, you and I have a lot that we got to talk about today. And we have had it just seems to never be a dull moment in college football, does it? And definitely from earlier today, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, I believe, when it comes to the SEC and the Big Ten as a whole. But yeah, man, it's just so weird what's going on. I did kind of want to touch briefly on what happened at SEC spring meetings this past week. I don't know if you heard anything crazy that came out of it. Steve Sarkisian decided to talk. And guess who responded? So Cody Campbell came out and has said that we are offering to basically buy out Texas's non-conference opponents, which I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it would be Abilene Christian, I believe Texas State, and it would be a Texas Tech and Texas matchup. And Sark has already said, we could beat them with our twos. Now, I don't know if they're talking about them specifically, but all he said was there's another school in Texas that we can beat with our second team guys. I don't think they're referencing Texas Tech, but I do think it's a shot at them because of the way that they schedule their games and the way that they perform in the postseason. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. I'll be very reserved for the time being.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely appreciate it. And listen, as a true fan, I mean, it would be incredible if we saw this game happen this season. Texas and Texas Tech. I mean, those two programs, yes, Texas was considered a big brother, but they used to be a part of the same conference, and it's a pretty nice little rivalry. Not maybe to the same level as Oklahoma or Texas A&M, or even, man, Texas and Texas Tech don't like each other. And I think there is precedence in terms of being able to make this happen if both programs are interested in making this happen. Because I think back to that really weird COVID season, thinking about Coastal Carolina and BYU, but both teams had their games canceled on them week of when they're supposed to play a particular opponent because of some COVID issues that were happening in the other team's program. So they looked at each other like, listen, man, we're trying to play a game. You're trying to spot the ball, and they got it set up within the week. So it's definitely a unique situation seeing a schedule change for this season 100 days out. But at the same time, it's not unprecedented. I mean, we've seen this before in the COVID season. So, I mean, if Texas is really about it and Texas Tech is really about it, I mean, there's a way to make it happen. And I mean, it would suck for Texas State because Texas State, that would be an awesome opportunity for them to go to Austin. It would be an awesome opportunity for Abilene Christian to go play in Lubbock, Texas. I mean, that's a really good FCS program. But I mean, there's levels to this, and Texas and Texas Tech, I mean, that would be an incredible matchup that we would have in week 1 of our college football season. It truly would.
I really like Texas State. I'm a big fan of GJ Kinney. I've been following GJ Kinney ever since he was at UIW. I'm a Southeastern alum now, so I was very, very familiar with what he had done. To me, this situation seems implausible, but not impossible. I do think that something like this could happen, but I don't know if Chris Del Conte is going to come down and do it. I don't know what administration is going to be talking about behind the scenes. I think Tech is 100% in with it. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mac Leftwich even said, F it, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely interest there, at least on one of the sides. Now, realistically, as you mentioned, probably what's most likely going to happen out of this is that we're going to see a home and home established between these two programs, maybe 2027 and beyond. I do think that while we would love it, it's not the most realistic to see this game scheduled for this year. And it's really from the standpoint of, for two separate reasons, right? Texas Tech is not going to give up a home game to go play in Austin, right? Texas is not going to give up. Right?
Why do you say that?
Well, because it's an opportunity for their fans to enjoy their football team in person. I mean, if they had to go and play in Texas, I mean, Texas is not going to give Texas Tech a lot of tickets. They're not going to let the Red Raiders take over their own stadium. Like that's simply not going to happen. And it's ditto for the Texas Longhorns. They're not going to give up one of their home games either to go play at Texas Tech because, again, I mean, it takes away an opportunity for home fans who maybe not be able to travel really far to go and experience their football team in person, right? So I look at it from that perspective. And of course, we can't have this as a neutral site game. Although the idea of this happening in Jerry's world surely would be a fun little time. College football games deserve to be on home campuses. We can't be having neutral site games for whatever reason. And then also for Texas, it's they put themselves in a lose-lose situation, in my opinion.
Yes.
Because you look at the Texas Longhorns schedule holistically, I personally have it as the toughest schedule in all of college football. So you replace Texas State, hypothetically, with Texas Tech. You go from being the top schedule in college football to still the top schedule in college football. So you're adding another losable game onto your schedule, and you're already playing non-conference games in the SEC, which, whether people like it or not, the SEC is still probably the best conference in college football from a top to bottom perspective. But then, if you win that game, is that really going to create that much more of a reward? So, looking at it from that perspective, it's a lose-lose. But then also, what if you don't schedule this game at all after you get called out by Texas Tech after your comments? I mean, it's what was mentioned on the Pat McAfee show, talked about essentially there's quite a few steers down there in Austin, but not very many bulls. So it kind of creates this lose-lose situation. So I get it that Texas might not be too terribly interested in setting it up for this season because, it's the juice worth the squeeze. Maybe not from a strength of schedule perspective, but also it could have been avoided if Sark just kept his mouth shut about, some of the other teams in the state of Texas. Texas Tech does need this game more because Texas Tech, on the other end, man, that schedule is dog water. They would need that boost.
Look, let's cut to the chase. I think Texas Tech, their schedule would be significantly much better. Even if they do lose to Texas, it's a quality loss for them because guess who you play in 2 weeks? A team that you're probably going to have as a semifinal for the Big 12 championship when you go play Houston. We'll get to them later on in the video, but I mean, it's hard to not notice how bad this Texas Tech schedule is. The only tough opponents that I see right now is you're at home against Houston. This is your away games too. At Oregon State, who went 2-10 this past year, I caught a lot. Let me just tell you, Jake, I caught a lot of BS from their freaking fan base 2 weeks ago because I was talking about how the Mountain West was going to be more competitive this year in the Pac-12. Their whole fan base came over and all of a sudden just found this tweet and just started attacking me. Y'all went 2-10 in the freaking Pac-10 when you played Mountain West teams. You lost to Sam Houston and you lost to Tulsa.
I remember watching that Sam Houston game too. That was an experience.
Are you an Oregon guy?
I'm not even an Oregon guy. I'm a general lover of college football. So it's always a funny story when I tell this out to folks. So I have a toddler son. But at the time, when football season was coming around, I think it was about like 10, 11 months old, right? The consistency wasn't necessarily there in terms of like sleeping through the night yet.
Right.
So he woke up in the middle of the night. It was my turn, which it was Saturday. Saw this couple of games on, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So it was like, all right, let me go ahead. Let me go ahead. Told the wife, hey, don't you worry about a thing. I got this. And then I went out into the living room, trying to get this baby back to sleep. And while I'm waiting for him to come back to sleep and calm down, I turn on Oregon and Sam Houston.
I love it.
And I watched it to the end because that's how long he stayed awake. He stayed up for most of the second half. And it was the game of our time.
That's what I'm talking about.
But no, I don't disagree with you at all, though, in the sense of I think the Pac-12 is going to be a better conference holistically, but I do think that the Mountain West is going to be more competitive. I think there's more teams.
That's my ultimate thing that I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
The Mountain West is going to have so much more competition in it. Now, yes, is the Pac-12 going to be a better conference? Yes. I do think that is going to be that nobody's disagreeing with that statement. All likelihood, we're going to get a G5 representee in the playoff from the Pac-12. It's either going to be Boise or it's going to be maybe a team like Washington State. We'll see what happens in the first year with Jimmy Rogers as their head coach. But I think other than that, it's hard to look at the Mountain West and not say, look at who you have. Mm-hmm. Look at what is in your conference. Look at what the quality of opponents that you have, and you look at what the games look like this past year, and you compare it to what the future Pac-12 matchups at the time, now current Pac-12 matchups were led this past year. By far, Mountain West was so much better. But back to Texas Tech in Texas. You're at Oregon State, at Colorado, at Cincinnati, at Oklahoma State, and at Baylor. The only tough one I see is going to Nippert Stadium, which is very underrated, and then you play at Boone Pickens in Stillwater.
Yeah, and then you do have a sneaky competitive home game against Arizona. But I mean, I'm with you. Like it's the type of schedule that I'm looking at right now, where I would genuinely be surprised, even with the Brandon Sorsby news that's came out like over the course of the last 30 to 45 days, that they end up losing more than a couple of games. But it also means that there's very little margin of error right now if you're Texas Tech, right, if you want to get back to this college football playoff. Because we've seen how the Big 12 is perceived in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee. BYU just went 11-1 in the regular season, and they were left out of the College Football Playoff. And they had a better strength of schedule last year than what Texas Tech is probably going to have this year. So holistically, there's one of two ways you're getting in. Obviously, winning that Big 12 championship because they changed the rules up to where, hey, if you're a Big 12 champ or an ACC, Big 10, SEC champ, like you're going to get in no matter what your record is. Or you run the table in this regular season. Yeah, which I could go on a whole nother tangent about those reforms of like the college football playoff. But going back to Texas Tech for a second, though, they could either win the Big 12 or run the table in their regular season schedule. Because, I mean, if you go undefeated in the regular season, I don't care how your strength of schedule is at that point. It is incredibly hard to run the table in college football. And that's regardless of strength of schedule. I feel the same way about that. If any G6 team was able to run the table for their like respective schedules as well.
Right.
Imagine that winning is hard. We should reward winning, you know? So
We're not about to do that with this expanded playoff. We're accepting mediocrity at this point. And I've gone on so many tirades as of late about it, and it's utterly ridiculous. Here's the thing about Texas. Sark better back it up. Like you already mentioned, I think that Texas went and basically spray painted a big ass freaking target on their back about the size of that sheet, and now everybody is about to try to shoot the target. If Texas goes 9-3 again this year, and if they miss the playoff, I think that we're starting to talk about Steve Sarkisian in the same conversation that we had about James Franklin.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's crazy?
Go ahead, my bad.
What's crazy is that I don't even think that's the floor. I think there's a world that's in place where Texas can finish worse than 9-3. I mean, they got a lot of tough games on their schedule.
How close were we seeing to having a 7-5 regular season for Texas? If Kentucky finds their offense against them in the fourth quarter, they win that football game. And if Mississippi State doesn't have Coleman Hutzler as their freaking defensive coordinator, they wipe the floor off of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, that was a Mississippi State team. I believe they had a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. They should have closed that game. You know, so I mean, I'm right there with you. So I mean, yeah, there's a pathway there too. I mean, you're looking at this year for Texas. I mean, Ohio State, obviously, but then you got to go play like in Knoxville. Like Tennessee is going to be a tough team. You know, they got some problems at the quarterback position. Red River rivalry, that's always going to be a close and competitive game. What do we think about Ole Miss with Trinidad Chambliss, Missouri on the road, LSU on the road, Texas A&M on the road? Like it's going to be muddy waters. Like Texas is going to have to bring it to most of these games. Like there is very few games where Texas is going to just simply roll out their headgear and win the football game. Like there's just not a lot of those types of games on their schedule this year. So, you know, target on their back. We'll see if Sark can back it up.
It's funny how Sark can talk so much, and we really have to backtrack how much he's been talking. This has been going on since the final college football playoff rankings were even announced. When he said, "Oh, Texas should have been in at 9-3." How many? You're a very talented team. I'm not denying that. And everybody was complaining about two group of five teams getting in. I think that JMU game was so much more competitive than what people realize. Yes, it was a double-digit loss for a group of five team. You understand that JMU put 37 on Oregon in Autzen Stadium
and they
against
covered
the defense that arguably is going to have at least 4 or 5 draft picks year after year after year after year. You're talking about an Oregon team that is incredible, that is known for their offense. They had to put 52 to get out of there with a win.
Yeah, and
it's not like this was just a shabby group of 6 team, and people are looking at Texas from this past year, and it was nothing but up and down all year. You look at the beginning of the season where they had no answer whatsoever from an offensive line and offensive perspective. They looked horrible against Ohio State. They looked horrible against UTEP. They looked horrible from an offensive line perspective against Florida. They looked horrible offensively most of the year. And it wasn't until later on when you finally pulled the trigger and you finally let Arch Manning be Arch Manning in that bowl game against Michigan that we're finally seeing the big picture of what this team can be.
Yeah, and this was also a team that was blown out by Georgia, by the way, which, you know, they ended up having a rough time in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff too against Ole Miss, which, I mean, listen, if they just would have lost to just Ohio State and Georgia and they got in at 10-2, like I would have been perfectly fine with that. I mean, that's a tough schedule that Texas played last year. Not as tough as what we're thinking it's going to be this year, but it was still a really tough schedule. So I always enjoyed the conversation of, oh, we got left out because we played Ohio State. Dude, you lost to Florida, dude. Florida fired their head coach by the time that you played them. and they didn't even make it to a bowl game. Like, there's a brand new coaching staff down in Gainesville for a reason. So, I mean, I'm right there with you. And yeah, I'll say this too about that Oregon defense. Like, very well coached defense last year under Toshua Boyd. That's why he's the head coach at Cal right now. Like, he's going to do some incredible things out there in Berkeley to try to revitalize that program, because it was I would not say a great program, but it was certainly a good program before Justin Wilcox turned into mediocrity. So, yeah, I mean, got to get a little some love for the algorithm here tonight. But yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see if Arch can make that jump, because I think that's really going to be the key here. If Arch doesn't make that jump, I mean, like you mentioned, I think there's a path where they could finish 9-3 or worse. That could genuinely happen. But hey, if he makes that jump that people are expecting, ESPN has him as a top 5 quarterback in college football. You know, they'll be back in the playoff. They'll be competing for a national championship.
I'm not denying what Sark has done since they first got to the SEC, because they've had some really good teams. Make no mistake about that. Here's my only issue with Sark is that his mouth overloads what the on-field product looks like. Because you look at where they are as a whole. This past year, they were 4-2 or 3-2 against top 10 teams this past year. But you look at those teams and who they were. 2 of them were playoff teams in Oklahoma and Texas A&M. They got bounced in the first round. Vanderbilt was a top 10 team for a while. You look at they lost to Ohio State. They got blown out by Georgia. What has been the biggest factor in both of those losses to Georgia? They lost the freaking turnover battle. And Arch looked absolutely silly in both of those games. And you go back to last year when they played top 10 teams, they had one win against a top 10 team, and that was Michigan, who looked atrocious. They were going through a rebuild this year. They shouldn't have even been in the top 10 in 2024.
No, especially with that quarterback play in 2024. That was that was an experience. Like watching that for our friends and sisters up in the great state of Michigan. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what Texas and here's the thing: winning a national championship is going to be incredibly difficult. They do have the pieces to get it done, though. There is a path where they can finish undefeated. I think there isn't a single game on their schedule where you're looking at this Texas football team and what they got on their schedule. Like, there isn't one game on there where you're looking at it, there's like no shot that they win that game. You know, I think realistically, they're probably looking at a 10-2 team like for this Texas squad going into this year and sneaking into the college football playoff at that point. But again, it really comes down to Arch's development. I think that's going to be a real important piece to this.
There's a lot that still needs to be. I'm still going to have question marks about Texas, and they keep saying they're back. I don't believe they're back until they win a national championship, in my opinion. Jake, the SEC and the Big Ten have put together a joint statement on the Protect College Sports Act. For those of you that are unaware of what the Protect College Sports Act is, it's a major bill that is currently being proposed, I guess, or trying to get passed through the House and the Senate. It came less than a week after the Scores Act's public collapse in the House and squarely in the middle of the SEC spring meetings in Destin. And as a result, the legislation became a major point of discussion. It takes aim at transfers and coach movement and includes the Lane Kiffin rule, which states that coaches cannot leave their team before season ends. So here's my thing about Lane Kiffin, though. Technically, he didn't violate the rule. He stayed until the end of the regular season. So they need to I think there needs to be an exception to that, because we see head coaches all the time do this. How many head coaches in the past 15 years have we seen leave a mid-major, a Power 4 conference to go for another job? But what makes that situation so unique is that you're talking about a team that was on the road to go to a college football playoff. I think that was the biggest difference in between that and then when you have this bill that comes up. So I know you know a little about the bill. So give me your thoughts on this. What was your initial reaction if you saw this at all? We'll get to the joint statement in a bit.
Yeah, I was sitting back and like looking through like some of the language in the bill, and it was as I was reading through it, it was starting to turn into one of those memes where it was like the worst person that just made a really good point. Because I mean, there was a lot of really good points here when I was looking through his Protect College Sports Act. I mean, like the transfer rule, like going to one penalty-free like transfer. I think that's a really good idea because just seeing guys like transfer to like 4, 5, or 6 different schools. Like in the case of a handful of athletes, I mean, it's absolutely crazy, and it really like prevents like fans really getting emotionally invested into the programs, especially when you're turning over half of your roster, in some extreme cases, 75% of your roster year in and year out. So it's a lot harder for fans to go and be invested in the program. So I really enjoyed the transfer rule, as long as there is a little bit of an exception for like if that head coach does end up going into like gets a new job elsewhere. I don't think that if a person wants to transfer at that point, I don't think the student athlete should be penalized. Neither sure, and this happened with Akron last year as well. Akron was found to be ineligible for the postseason because of APR scores. If a student athlete is in good academic standing, but the team at the Ron is buns when it comes to academics and it causes an APR ban, a student athlete should be able to transfer to a school that is actually meeting those academic requirements to participate in the postseason. So as long as there is a couple of those exceptions in there, I really like that transfer rule. I'm curious to see how the eligibility limit is going to work as well. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of you do have guys go into the military and then go into college later on in life after they serve in the military. Will some of those guys get an exception? And then how about guys, and this kind of applies more to like the BYUs of the world, where guys that go on mission trips in the middle of their college experience. And it's not like a short experience either. We're talking about a 1 to 2 year experience. Is there going to be an exception for them, like being able to pause that eligibility timer? Like it makes a lot of sense what they're talking about doing the 5 for 5. So that makes a lot of sense. The one thing I think that could really hold everything up though is this media rights thing, where creating that framework for conferences to pull broadcast rights, I think that would really help open up a path for like a collegiate version of NFL Red Zone, hence the name. But is that going to be something that the bigger conferences are going to want to sign on and give up some of the power that they have, because they do have the advantage in terms of like media funding and media rights right now? They're not going to want to give up that advantage willingly. So I'm sure that's why the Big Ten and the SEC did what they did, talking about how we don't support this bill right now, probably primarily because of that, because they have that advantage, and you're not going to willingly give an advantage up, especially in this current time frame.
I think this kind of relates to expansion, in my opinion, because of the media rights deal that's going on. Because the Tony Petitti, we got to remember this. Do you know what his background is in? Television. I think that he wants 24 because guess what it's going to have? He's got friends that's in the broadcasting industry. When we expand to 24, ESPN doesn't just have exclusive rights to the college football playoff anymore. They got to market out to CBS. They got to market out to Fox, etc. So now you're going to have all these other major networks that are going to be benefiting off of this. That's why, not really a shot, but kind of a shot at Tim Brando. That's why you want 24 teams, brother, because it's going to put another paycheck in your pocket. That's the only reason why people want this, is because it's all about money at the end of the day. And I hear people that say, well, games are going to become more competitive. Maybe guys won't opt out as much. How do you know that? If you're a consistent team that's going to continuously be at the bottom, and you're playing a team like Bama, or you're playing a team like Ohio State, Oregon, that's going to be a national championship contender? I don't think that it's really going to matter. What is going to matter more to a program? A team that went 8-4 or 9-3 in the regular season, was a bottom part of the college football playoff when we went to 24, and then get bounced in the first round, or a meaningful bowl win. That's what I think teams need to really consider when it comes to this. But the media, I know I kind of went off on a little tangent, but the media rights deal, it's very critical in my opinion, because it's so weird when we talk about that side, and we talk about what it's going to mean for this. So I do believe that there's going to be more of a bigger revenue share near pool. And I think that's primarily why the Big Ten and the SEC are not going to be completely in favor of this, because I do think that it's more going to be shared to other conferences as well. But you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong. I've been kind of iffy when it comes to that, but I do kind of see a relation to that.
Yeah, I mean that's really, I think, the one sticking point. If it doesn't end up getting passed anytime soon, it probably because of that media rights like standpoint of the bill, trying to get, it's provided that 75% of FBS schools agree. It's not even like you force them to do it. It's kind of a voluntary framework. So that could be like a sticking point in terms of, because I think most of the FCS teams, they would go for that in order to try to catch up to the SEC and the Big Ten schools of the world, right? So that could be the one sticking point that prevents this from passing. Because even if it does pass, I can see the Big Ten and SEC sue to kind of prevent it from going into motion and be effective right away. But I mean, everything else that's in here makes a lot of sense. I mean, like codifying the NIL and revenue sharing, getting some more regulations on that. I think that makes a lot of sense, because right now we're kind of in this Wild West in terms of how we define NIL at this point in time. And then the scholarship and medical protections, I think, is really important as well. Protect guys that, hey, you can't get cut based solely on, athletic performance or roster decisions, and, require institutions to provide medical coverage, because at some places you can get that medical coverage, but it really depends on the resources of the university. And so by codifying it to make sure that student athletes, regardless of where you go to school, get that medical treatment that you need if you end up needing it during your college career, I think that's really important for not only the physical health of the student athletes, but also the mental health of the student athletes as well, because that's something that's really important. And we've seen that in the forefront over the last few years. Now, something I know you touched on in this expanded playoff, and I'm sure regardless of where we stand on the 2014 playoff, it's probably going to happen. It's just a matter of when it happens and not if it happens. But I do kind of want to preface things in terms of, if we get the 2014 playoff, I don't think that's automatically going to mean that like the world is going to fall apart. I think if it's actually implemented correctly, I think it actually would be great for our sport, because you look at what our FCS brothers are doing. They have a 2014 playoff. They're doing perfectly fine. Same thing with Division II and Division III. Like all of these other divisions of college football, they have 2014 playoffs or bigger, and they still have that urgency of the regular season, which is what we're looking for at the end of the day.
They also have a 10-game regular season too. I think that's going to be the big issue when we talk about that. And they don't have conference championships.
Yeah, and that's like the big reason why I'm not a supporter of it is, losing conference championship weekend, which gets talked about a lot. And I think it would end up being the death of bowl season, to be honest with you. Because, I mean, we've seen the opt-outs for bowl season.
And that's opt-outs have been getting worse since 2015.
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely see that. But I feel that it would be the death of bowl season if we had a 2014 playoff, because the opt-outs are really bad now under a 12-team format. If we double this field, we are going to see a lot more opt-outs, because teams that don't make the college football playoff, this 2014 field, they're not going to really care. And that's a shame, because, bowl games are kind of an emotional fabric of the sport, and to see that kind of whittle away, I mean, that's rough to see, man.
It really is, to be honest with you, but that's what we have at this point in time. But the SEC and the Big Ten released a joint statement on this, and it says the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference support a sustainable national framework for college sports, one with an effective portal, clear eligibility standards, and protections and benefits for student athletes. While we appreciate the leaderships of Senator Cruz and Cantwell in pursuing these shared goals, we do not support the Protect College Sports Act as drafted. The bill leaves critical issues unresolved. It does not meaningfully preempt the patchwork of state laws or provide the protections needed to make and enforce consistent rules, both essential to long-term stability in college athletics. It also shifts ongoing rulemaking to Congress, limiting the ability to adapt quickly as the landscape evolves. Rather than reducing litigation, the bill likely expands it without offering clear alternatives for dispute resolution. Finally, the bill alters the House settlement revenue sharing framework in a way that may result in fewer student athletes receiving direct revenue share payments. We are committed to working with Senator Cruz and Cantwell and other members of Congress to improve this legislation so that it can provide lasting stability for college athletics. So if you're so hell bent on having something that is beneficial for student athletes and has these protection benefits, why in the hell is over $100 million in promised third-party NIL money unapproved by the College Sports Commission? And we don't have a freaking answer why. We don't.
No, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I understand that it's not fully perfect. I mean, we just talked about a couple of things that, feel a little bit iffy about this bill. But I mean, at least it's something. I mean, the NCAA is not capable of governing college football. They just aren't. You could make multiple, just really multiple different examples. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss, it was a shocker to see Trinidad Chambliss be able to get an additional year of college eligibility. I thought that the evidence brought forward was a little shaky at best. And the fact that the NCAA lost that, it's going to be kind of crazy. The fact that Brandon Sorsby, there's an outside chance he can get eligibility this year in spite of all the allegations that he has against him right now. And that's not even because of the evidence that is against him. That's more of a lack of confidence in the NCAA in the courtroom as well. Like the fact that that's thrown out there as well, that's kind of crazy too. And so I'm looking at this bill, and listen, I get it. It's not perfect, but we need something. It's kind of the equivalent of we're in this traffic jam, and this College Sports Act bill gets us moving along at 25 miles per hour on the highway. We're not going up the speed. It's not smooth, but we're getting somewhere. It is progress.
It still really doesn't answer the question of when they're going to freaking approve this $100 million in NIL money that still hasn't been in the clearinghouse. And there's no answer as to why this is happening. I have been a big proponent of a Super League since 2024. I've been on record as saying this. I've had Jake Crane on my show, and we've talked about this before. We don't think that the NCAA is going to last long. Now, I do think they're going to be around for a little bit longer because, as I pull up this comment real fast, it says NCAA is done. Nobody likes the NCAA. No, nobody's liked the NCAA. Here's the problem, though. They're getting power again. They got this. The Brennan Sorsby situation, in my opinion, was a power grab for them because they have been getting punched in the mouth repeatedly over the last year. The Nico Yamailava case where he's on a private jet while he's on a recruiting visit that the NCAA tried to strike down, that got nullified. The Diego Pavia situation, that got nullified. The Trinidad Chambliss situation, that got nullified. Now you have a position where the NCAA is about to grab power, and guess what? They're probably going to get it because no judge in Lubbock County is going to touch this Brennan Sorsby case. And I just don't see a scenario where anybody is going to be able to be in a position to win at the end of the day. It's a lose-lose situation. The NCAA, you have this staple on your back if you're Brennan Sorsby and says, I gambled, I did this, I did that. And if you're a judge that disapproves of this, The NCAA loves you, but at the end of the day, Lubbock County, it's a tough place to get reelected if your star quarterback is not on the field because you denied him to be back on the field. But, there's so many things in this bill that I think could benefit the student athlete. But I also think that there's a lot of things that have to get reviewed by – I think I'm very curious to hear the fan base perspective of this as well, because I think this is important, not just for student athletes. This affects the viewer as well, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, especially if like the media rights piece comes into it, and we see a consolidated rights package for college football, similar to what we see for the NFL. I mean, that's really going to centralize watching for college football, because I mean, you see a lot of games on ESPN, but I mean, we have games all over the place. Whereas for the NFL, it's a lot more centralized, down to a couple of stations. So I'm very curious about that aspect. And I know that there's still some holes that need to be worked through. But, I mean, it's something, because like I mentioned before, I mean, we have literally nothing right now in terms of any kind of regulation, for the transfer portal, no regulation for NIL. It at least puts those guardrails up so that college sports can feel more like college sports again.
I got a question.
Oh, boy.
Why hasn't a player been involved in this? Why don't we have a say from a player?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
It would make sense.
It would,
because you're actively talking about the player. You're talking about the biggest stars on the planet. Go get guys that are going to go to this hearing and go to go in front of Congress and speak their mind. But I think the only reason why they're not going to do it is because of what lies for them in the future.
Well, I've heard Brandon Sorsby has a lot of time on his hands. I'm sure he could go and talk to these guys over the course of the offseason.
I don't think, and here's the thing too, I don't think he'll go in the supplemental draft. What did his lawyer say Monday after the hearing? What did he say after the hearing Monday? I saw some bits and pieces about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's I actually am not too terribly sure what his exact comments. I've just been I'm like you, it's in the very early stages. I'm assuming that with the evidence against him, Sorsby is probably not going to play this season, but I'm not exactly holding my breath. I would be surprised if Sorsby has his eligibility reinstated. But it wouldn't be a complete shock to me at the same time, if that makes any sense.
So his attorney Jeffrey Kessler, who represented the NCAA in the House settlement, this case I think is badly, or not. He didn't represent the NCAA. He did actually. This case I think is badly misunderstood by a lot of people. It's very important that everybody understands that it is undisputed that he never did any betting to compromise the integrity of his team. The bets he made on his team was when he was not participating in that team, and he never bet again to do that. But here's the thing, though. He has admitted to gambling while he was at Indiana and Cincinnati. He went through so many different loopholes throughout the state he went between states to gamble. And when the news broke out, that's when he decided to enter rehab.
Yeah. So the thing that I think about more about the Brandon Sorsby situation more than anything is I think about it what's the third order effects is going to happen to Indiana and Cincinnati. I know that he didn't really play very much. He only appeared in a couple of games for Indiana. But Cincinnati, I mean, he was a 2-year starter for Cincinnati. So
and they knew about his gambling from what I heard.
Yeah, they did. So I'm actually very curious to see after this investigation does come to an end, what happens to Indiana and Cincinnati? What kind of punishment do they receive, if they receive any kind of punishment, because it's basically like you spin the wheel and that's what you end up getting. It's very randomized. But that's something that I'm also very curious about from that third world order effect. You're like, what happens to Cincinnati, particularly them, because he did start for a couple of years. It's not like where he was at Indiana and he was primarily a backup. I mean, I imagine that's probably not going to be that bad. That season, Indiana was not winning very many games anyway. So there's, if you're talking about like vacating wins, which I think is kind of one of the dumber things that we see in our sport right now. Right. There's not going to be a lot of wins for Indiana to take away from that time frame, right? But like Cincinnati could be hurt a lot more here though, because we're talking about 2 years of starting, and I mean, like he made Cincinnati at least decent when he was there.
Yes, I mean, this is a very, very sticky situation. I don't know if either school is going to get punished, but the NCAA knows that this happened while they were at both schools, and Cincinnati knew about the gambling as well. So I'm curious to see what happens in that department. I don't think Texas Tech is going to get punished. I don't know if anybody will. I think really we're going to get fines. I don't think we'll see any sanctions at all, but again, it's so weird. So we'll see what happens. So Ken Curry is going to be the presiding judge. I got a question. Is Ken Curry from Lubbock County? Is he a judge in that department? It's a legitimate question, because if he's a Texas Tech alum, no, he got a degree from UT Arlington and then got his JD from Houston. So he's not.
No conflict of interest. We might be good there, because I know there was a judge that was previously on there that was a Texas Tech alumni.
The old judge recused himself from the case.
Yeah.
Which I think was smart on his part, because, like I already mentioned, he's pretty much committing he's having a political execution at that point.
Yeah.
So I think that was smart on his part. But staying in the great state of Texas, Jake, this Houston Cougars team is going to be very special this year. Give me your thoughts real fast on the Cougars for 2026, coming off of a 10-win season under Willie Fritz and entering their third year in the Big 12.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up this Houston team, because I know we were talking about them on Twitter, or at least I saw that you were the other day. I mean, I'm looking at a Houston team that's capable of winning 10+ games yet again, and I mean, there's a real path for them to finish 11-1 in the regular season if everything goes right for them. I mean, start at the quarterback position. Keeson Henderson, he came in, very highly touted quarterback, 5-star recruit. He's going to be the future of this program. But man, like Connor Wigman, like not a lot of people, I guess he's a very underrated quarterback in the sense that he's not really talked about a ton, but quietly he's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. I know he's not as sexy as a Devin Dampier, or he's not as sexy as a Drew Messmaker, who just transferred in from North Texas, going to be playing for Oklahoma State this year. Brandon Sorsby, if Brandon Sorsby was actually going to play, he would definitely be in that conversation as one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 going into this year. I think Will Hammond is pretty good too in the limited playing time that he did have last year. But, even though Keeson Henderson is going to be the future of this program, Connor Wegman he's a special ball player now. There's not really a lot to say. I think they improved on the offensive line. I love the additions of Anthony Boswell and Drew Terrell, which that was a real shortcoming for them last year. We saw it in that Texas Tech game specifically. We saw Houston. They took some L's in the trenches. I also love the receiving core with Amari Thomas, one of the best receivers in the Big 12, and Trent Walker transferring in from Oregon State. He had over 800 yards last year. So I mean, and Willie Fritz. I mean, what can you say about him? Willie Fritz has done an incredible job with the Houston Cougars. So I think there's a path for them to win 10+ games. And I don't think it would be the craziest thing in the world if we're at the end of this regular season, we're talking about 11-1 football team. I think that they have that kind of ceiling this upcoming season.
That early game against Texas Tech is going to tell me all I need to know about Houston.
Yes.
I would not be surprised at all if they end up going undefeated in the regular season. And I say that not even joking. I really believe that this could be a team that could finish undefeated on the regular season. Here's what Houston is going to have to address is where you are in the interior and where you are in your back seven. But you also have to think about this. This was a Houston team that lost their best probably the best defensive play caller in the Big 12 in Shell Wood, who's now at Texas Tech, who just made them into one of the best defenses in all of college football, and they just went to a college football playoff. Who's to say that Houston, with their second full year under Austin Armstrong, who really didn't take a step back this past year, I thought they were really, really good in that department. I think when the addition of a guy like Mekhi Hughes, who reunites with Willie Fritz when they were at Tulane, is going to make a massive difference. I think Hughes got lost in the mix at Oregon, from what I heard, and when I talked with a Houston Cougar analyst the other day, he told me that there was a lot of things that happened, the kind of deals that came through. He really got the taste of some guys that were better than him at Houston, and that kind of threw him off. So he ended up leaving. And honestly, I don't think he was ever going to be comfortable leaving the South. And I thought that it was a very, very bold decision for Mekhi Hughes to leave the state of Louisiana and go to a place like Oregon. I get it. He's from Birmingham. He's been across, 3 different states in the span of almost 5 years at this point. But I just don't – I am very, very, very confident that Hughes is going to go back to what he was at Tulane. I think he's in a much better position. I think this is an offensive line he's familiar with. Was with Shadray Hurst, the interior offensive lineman, 2-time all-conference guy at Tulane. This is an experienced offensive line that does not have a whole lot of holes to fill after the success of this past year.
Oh, yeah, especially with what they added in the transfer portal, too, with that offensive line. I mean, I would really like the addition of Anthony Boswell, specifically, interior offensive lineman coming in from Toledo, who I think could crack the starting rotation for the Houston Cougars.
I think he was the number one run blocker in the MAC this past year.
Yeah, dude was a dog. I mean, that's why he was brought in, so they can have some more beef on the offensive line. And then Drew Terrell, the offensive tackle out of Miami of Ohio, he comes in as well.
Never mind. That's who I was thinking of.
Drew Terrell?
Yes.
Yeah, but he could definitely has that potential to start as well. And yes, they on the defense side of the ball, I think they can be improved there too. I mean, you mentioned the defensive play calling just now, but even though they're losing Latrell McCutcheon to the NFL draft, Will James was one of the better corners in the Big 12, was a second-team All-Big 12 guy last year. They also added a Javion White from Tulane, who had 3 interceptions, was one of the better defenders in the American Conference last year as well. So I think that secondary, even though they lose a player to the NFL, I actually don't think it's crazy that the secondary could be improved from last year. And I'll say I think the linebacking group could be improved, led by Jaden Yates from Ole Miss. Was a solid contributor for the Rebels last year with over 50 tackles. Houston's got a good football team. That Texas Tech game is going to tell them a lot. And I'll tell you this, Texas Tech, you're looking at either breaking in Will Hammond, or if Will Hammond isn't fully ready to go because he had a catastrophic injury last year, could be looking at Lloyd Jones, who in very limited playing time looked pretty good against West Virginia, but he only threw a handful of passes. We'll be talking about a redshirt freshman making his third career start. And even though that game is going to be happening at Lubbock, that's going to be Texas Tech's first true test, because the first 2 games for Texas Tech at the same time, Abilene Christian and at Oregon State on the road, which I think Oregon State's going to be better, but I don't see Oregon State being a bowl team either. They're going to be better than 2-10 though, but it just goes to show that could be a sneaky game, even though that game is happening in Lubbock.
I think they look good from a receiver standpoint. For Texas Tech, they brought in a guy like Malcolm Simmons from Auburn. You also brought in Dante Lee, who is a downhill threat from Liberty. You brought in a top 10 transfer portal class, but your quarterback position is going to be the tell-all be-all if you are Texas Tech. Houston has the advantage for now, unless Connor Wigman gets hurt against Abilene Christian. I don't think that he will. I think Houston has in the first two games against Oregon State and Southern. I think that the Cougars have all of the momentum in the world to be the best team in the Big 12 this year. Crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, I don't even think that's crazy at all. That's not ridiculous.
No. The advantage in that game has to go to Texas, has to go to Houston. Yeah. I understand that it's at Tech. I understand that it's going to be in Lubbock. Guys, that Texas Tech team is not as good without a guy like Brennan Sorsby. And knowing that you're probably going to be on your third quarterback, I don't expect Will Hammond to be back until probably conference play, in my opinion. I know that I've heard some reports that he's progressing pretty well, but listen, this is a guy that still struggles with his mobility. I don't know if he fully participated in spring practice this past year. But look, this is a team that is in Houston that just seems to find so many different weapons across the board and guys that are going to be able to fill in spots that were once lost. I mean, Chris Allen was a big loss for Houston this past year. And look, he is going to be able to fill that hole up really well. I think that Houston as a whole is better than what we expect. They have probably the best quarterback in the Big 12. They have by far the most complete offense in the Big 12. I think that this Willie Fritz offense is about to open up. The schedule is very, very favorable, and I think it's going to benefit Houston at the end of the day. I think they have the upper hand in the Big 12. I have them going 11-1 in the regular season, the lone loss potentially either to Arizona State or at Texas Tech. I see them as a Big 12 title contender at the end of the day and see them along with another Big 12 team in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I think it's ironically enough, I think from a Big 12 perspective, because I still think Texas Tech is going to do really well in the regular season. I think with the Sorsby news, it does open things up in terms of who can win the Big 12. And so it creates this path to where you can have multiple teams. Because I think originally it was probably going to be a one-bid league. But now I think it could be one of those situations where Texas Tech can still have that incredible season and then maybe lose in the Big 12 title game. And that's how you get your two, whether it be a Houston or somebody else in this conference. But even if, like in the off chance that Connor Wegman does end up getting hurt, I still think that's a possibility that Houston could still have the advantage at quarterback. I mean, Keyshawn Henderson was a 5-star guy. Like he could have gone anywhere else. And be honest, like the majority of these teams in the Big 12, you look at a Keyshawn Henderson, probably would be starting day one. I would definitely take them over whatever they have it in West Virginia right now. I would definitely take them over possibly like Arizona State, over Baylor for sure. Just not too terribly high on DJ Lagway. Iowa State would love to have a guy like Keyshawn Harrison right now. So you go on and on and on like in the Big 12. Like Keyshawn Henderson is probably good enough to start in the majority of these teams in the in the Big 12 conference. Maybe not the same hype as Bryce Underwood, but granted, Bryce Underwood was going to be the day one starter regardless. Keyshawn Henderson, you have an established quarterback here, which is why there isn't as much hype. But man, Keyshawn Henderson, I'm excited to see him play. I'm hoping that this 5-for-5 does get pulled through so that we could see him play in more than a handful of games, because he'll probably end up redshirting unless Connor Wegman does end up getting hurt. But yeah, I mean, I look at this Houston football team. I think they're improved across the board. Really don't see them really regressing in a ton of spots. I mean, maybe tight end. I mean, Tanner Colzell, that's a big loss for Houston that they're going to have to try to replace at the tight end position. But I mean, they're going to be fine from a weaponry perspective, and I think they're going to be better equipped to deal with this Texas Tech team. But again, that third game of the season is going to tell us everything that we want to know about really how high is that ceiling for the Houston Cougars coming into this year.
I think that the tight end room is going to be just fine, in my opinion. You brought in a guy like Patrick Overmeyer from UTSA, who was an absolute unit in the Military Bowl. I remember I'm in the gym working out, and I look on the TV, and I see this 250-pound tight end run down the sideline. It looked like he was probably running a 4.5 streaking to the end zone. I was like, this kid's going to be a very, very, very big star someday. And what do you know? Houston's able to find their next tight end. Both of them are very similar in stature and very similar in play style as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing him play. I know that he didn't have a ton of production at UTSA. I know he looked pretty good in the Military Bowl. But beyond that, I mean, he didn't have a ton of production. So it's just a matter of, like, from a consistency standpoint, he has all the physical tools to be really good and be at the same level as Tanner Colzell. Is he able to put it together over a 12-game schedule, playing against tougher competition? Because while the American, really good conference for the G6. At the same time, though, like there's levels to this, and Big 12 is generally going to be a higher level of competition. Let's see how he stacks up against some overall better players in the secondary and in the linebacking room as well.
It's going to be interesting, to say the least. Who do you have as a sleeper team this year that we're probably not talking about throughout this offseason? Because I know I have a few that I have in mind. I wanted to hear your thoughts on some sleeper teams that you kind of have written down, some teams that you were during your write-ups, you were kind of surprised to see the amount of talent and thought, man, this is a potential team that could see themselves as exceeding expectations by a lot.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and keep it in the Big 12 because we've been talking a lot of Big 12 football. A team that we haven't really talked about, but I think could play a really pivotal role in the Big 12 championship race. Unironically enough, TCU. We haven't really been hearing very much about TCU this year. And I know some of it is because they did end up losing Josh Hoover in the transfer portal. I know that's a big reason for that. But quietly, Sonny Dykes has crafted one of the best programs in the Big 12 over the last 4 to 5 years, between his playoff appearance in 2022 and, the amount of success that it was able to garner in between there. And yes, you're losing like a Josh Hoover and an Eric McAllister, but this quarterback from Harvard, Jaden Craig, I think he is a star in the making. I think he's going to thrive in Sonny Dykes' system and maybe be a little bit of a better fit than maybe a Josh Hoover was. I know Sonny Dykes had some very choice words about his quarterback. Really like their secondary in particular. I thought the transfer portal additions in the secondary, I think, is going to help them be really competitive on the defensive side of the ball. Then this running back from the Colorado School of Mines, Landon Walker, keep an eye out for him.
Oh, my goodness.
He's going to be a dog, man. Like, people don't know about Division II football, man. Colorado School of the Mines is not a team to mess with. And, like, Landon Walker, pivotal part of that offense for sure. So, TCU, one of those teams that feels like gets glossed over a lot, like in the context of the Big 12. But that team is capable of winning almost every game. Like the Texas Tech game at the end of the year, we'll see what the Red Raiders look like at the end of the season. That could be the one game where it's like, yeah, that might be a tough one for them to drop. But there's a world that exists where TCU can go 11-1 if everything goes right for them. And Jaden Craig and company is clicking, and the secondary looks better than expected. And I think the potential is there. So that's a team that I'm looking at just in the confines of the Big 12.
First of all, I got recruited by Colorado School of Mines whenever I was in high school.
Oh, no kidding.
I swear. Second of all, I did a write-up whenever Landon Walker first entered the transfer portal. And this is what I wrote down whenever I looked at his film. So much Cam Scatterbo type potential for him. Hard runner, doesn't go down after initial contact. good downfield vision to get him to the second level. Acceleration when he bursts into the secondary is almost NFL-like. I really like Landon Walker. I think he is very much going to be the Big 12's next Cam Scadaboo. And I think he may be even better than him. He is the Big 12's next biggest kept secret that nobody is going to talk about. TCU got some gems, absolute diamonds in the transfer portal. I love the Jaden Craig get from Harvard. I thought he was a stud this past year. The Ivy League, I was so stunned to see how much talent came from a quarterback position from the Ivy League. You look at what Yale had with Dante Reno. I don't think he would have entered the portal anyway. I think he's found his forever home at Yale. You look at what Penn had a quarterback that was incredible. I did a write-up on him, and their quarterback was incredible. Liam O'Brien from Penn, who's now at Cincinnati. There's just so much talent that came from the Ivy League this past year that, look, it's don't be surprised if the Ivy League is looked upon more seriously as a football type of conference in the next few years. But back to Landon Walker. He is a very, very powerful back, and he's going to be really, really freaking good. He's a guy that, I mean, coming from the Division II level, there's just so much dang talent and so much dang just overall depth at that level. And I wish people would pay more attention to it.
Because you could say the same thing really about Division III as well. I mean, Division III is even produced some really talented players, like particularly at the skill positions. I know when it comes to trench play, you can obviously see the difference between like the Division II ranks and like FBS football. Like that's really probably the biggest difference is kind of that level of play in the trenches. But like skill guys, like you mentioned, I mean, there's skill guys at every level that you're sitting there wondering, how did this guy only end up at Division II? Or how did this guy ended up at a like in the Pioneer League, like in the FCS? Like there's always like those guys that kind of pop up in the transfer portal process that you're like, how did he end up there in the first place?
This is incredible. So I think what's so cool is just seeing the schools that, you know, guys like myself or other guys that I know that got recruited and seeing how wide open the portal was and seeing them go on. It's kind of like a pipeline at times to kind of get to the next big level. And I think that's so cool, to be honest with you. But we're going to wrap it up here for another great episode of the Southern Sports Scene. Thank you, Jake, from our friends over at the College Football Red Zone. We have been, once again, communicating with them over the last several weeks. They put out some great content. What do you guys have going on the next couple of days, couple of weeks as we approach the college football season?
Yeah, I mean, like just enjoying the fact that when next month comes around, like that's the last full month of the college football off season. So very excited for that. You know, might be going ahead and maybe getting a little bit violent here on the channel. Maybe diving into some quarterback rankings as we get into like the month of June and month of July, and then it's really going to get that last big push of a preview season before like we get into the start of a brand new college football season. We're less than 90 days away, and I just can't wait for it, man.
Going to be interesting. The guys do some great work over there at College Football Red Zone. A lot of stuff that they have going on the next few weeks. We'll be continuing on with our live shows. Make sure you guys tune in Tuesdays and Friday nights at 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. Also, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button down below. I'll have the link to Jake's channel in the description below. Make sure you guys go ahead, hit that subscribe button, get them to 300 subscribers. Did y'all hit 300, by the way?
Yeah, we did like hit 300 like earlier this week, so very excited about that for sure.
We're about 60 away from 300 ourselves. Guys, we help creators. We love to do that. Y'all help them get to a good amount of subscribers by the end of the year. Make sure y'all do us a favor. Y'all hit the like, share, subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posted a video, or post a new short here on the Southern Sports Scene. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, stay blessed. No stress. Y'all have a great rest of the